Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this Tuesday morning. I see several of you online here, but I'm going to go ahead and block that out because I've got to get to my screens. So if you do need anything, please unmute and say, speak up, because I cannot see you while I'm doing the presentation. Too small of a screen. So we are continuing where we were last week in terms of going through listing documents and talking to your seller about these different listing documents. And I'm going to make a little bet, even though I know some of you are experienced agents, that you have not read some of these documents. We are going to get started though. As I said, listing documents, this is actually part 3 because I did the listing contract first. So I want to make sure you all are aware that there is another video that is called the Listing Paperwork Slam. It's going to have a slight variation because it does not have the delayed marketing form in there, but it's going to tell you everything you need to pull together to put a listing package together. It's not going to go over line by line. These are the videos that are going, well, theoretically, section by section, I should say. I'm not going line by line either. Okay. And just as well as part of what you're doing when you're taking a listing, you do need to create a comparative market analysis. And so there was a video recorded on May 20th, which I called Mini CMA. I did that particular one for tracking your hood for either new agents or agents that are not currently set up to watch an area, which I highly recommend. And the reason, as I've said many times before, is if somebody asks you how's the market and you can specifically say, well, that's really interesting that you asked because I've been watching this area, this part of town, or these homes, and this is what is happening right now. It gives you validity that you are actually a professional watching your area, watching homes that are coming on the market, going off the market, going and touring homes as well. So please take an opportunity to do that. Then setting up a new listing. I had gone over this the other day. In working on a listing, it's different than when you are helping a buyer, because when you're helping a buyer, you're going one place pretty much to get almost all your forms. The difference when you're setting up a listing, you have to go into ARMLS. You can use either Transaction Desk, or SkySlope Forms. You also now have Breeze. You should definitely be using that, folks, unless your client does not have a computer. It is so much better to have them fill in their seller property disclosure statements online. The other person can actually read it, but they can't skip any lines. They have to answer all the questions or you're alerted that something's been skipped. And lastly, you do need the ROG working docs. They do pop up in SkySlope Forms, but they're not always there in Transaction Desk. So SkySlope, you've got all these different things here, and working docs there. Adult Community Advisory Addendum. I don't know why those are coming up backwards, but there you go. So all those are on SkySlope and working docs. The input form, honestly, I get that out of ARMLS. I go into the MLS so that I can get the data that was already there if the property's been sold before, and I start from there rather than a blank slate. And that's telling me this is where we're starting this morning. We are starting on the lead-based paint disclosure. Now, it is very, very, very important that agents understand that there is a sequence on the lead-based paint, and we'll start with the top of this. Yes, this is a quote unquote an AAR form, but who actually generated and created this form? Does anybody know the entity that did that? The paid people. Who are the paid people? Who governs the paid? Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. And if you, as a realtor, do not fill this out in the correct sequence, you could be fined in excess of $1,000 per error here. So it adds up very quickly because we'll look at how many times there are initials. And if you have 2 clients, every initial that is wrong is a fine. And if you're the agent that is representing them, all those fines go to you, okay? So Does anybody remember the year? It's on there, but if you can't remember it, but homes built, what? Prior to 1978. If it was built in 1978, this form is not required. It's prior to 78. So something built on December 31st, 1977 is, and something built on January 4th, 1978 is not. Now, how many bets? They probably still have the same cans of paint, but that was the cutoff date, okay? So it's about lead poisoning, and the form has two sections. The first section must be filled in by the seller first. And I'll explain why when we get to the other section. But look, in 28 years of doing real estate, residential real estate, and something like 500, 600 transactions, I've had one client in all those years. The seller walked in and said, here's my lead-based paint packet. And she had a folder of lead-based paint information. I have not had a single client other than that one. So usually, in my experience, usually the seller has no knowledge of any lead-based paint. Now, if you are using SkySlope forms, I bet you will find you can't press a button there anymore. If you're in transaction desk, you can. So, but if you're using Breeze, Breeze allows the clients to fill out and check which box that they are talking about. Do they know or do they not know? And then the next question, which is B, says they have reports available, right? If they don't have any reports, they're checking the box that say they have no reports or records relating to it, even if they know about it. They don't have any paperwork, okay? Then the last paragraph, folks, this is important. The seller is acknowledging. So you're saying to your seller, you understand that if you know, seller, about any lead-based paint in this property, you are obligated to communicate that to the buyer. That's all it says, right? Seller's obligation to disclose if there is any known lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards in the premises. Pretty simple, right? 3 sets of initials, 2 boxes that have to be checked. Now, here's the reason it's so critical that that first section is done. The buyer acknowledges, and the first sentence says, buyer has read the information set forth above and has received copies of reports, records, or other materials listed above. If there's nothing written above because nobody's filled it out, how can the buyer say they've read the information set forth above from the seller? They can't. So if you're a buyer's agent and you end up taking a blank seller property disclosure and filling it out and letting your buyer do that, you as the agent, and then they sign and date it, buyer signed first, seller signed second. If this gets pulled by the EPA, you are the one liable for all of those initials mistakes. Now you will see there are 3 sets of initials here. There's a checkbox. There's at least 1 or 2 more signatures, depending on how many buyers. So 2 buyers, that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 errors because you get counted as one of those errors. So potentially $9,000 worth of fines. So I hope you will understand. Do not ever do that as a buyer's agent, and seller agents, listing agents, get this filled out and put onto your MLS. It should be there. The buyer's agent should not have to track you down for this lead-based paint form. You know the home was built before then, get that form filled out, right? Buyer agents have to fill in whether they've received or waived the right to the inspection. All right, good morning. It also says the buyers received a pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. That is available multiple places. You should be able to get it off of AAR, and or I think the Department of Real Estate actually has that on their website. So we used to have paper copies that we actually had to purchase. Okay, at the bottom, you will see why I'm talking about, oh, you know what? I missed an initial for the sellers. That would have actually been 10 errors. So initials need to initial this. Now, it does say whoever's receiving compensation. I will tell you at the very minimum, if you have 2 agents that are listed on the MLS as listing agents, or buyer agents, they both need to sign. Split the line, put two little initials above listing agent or two above cooperating agent. You can put a signature on the listing agent signature line, put one signature, split that, do one above, one below, but you need to fit all those in there. If you're a big team and you're splitting it a whole bunch more than that, at least ensure that the ones that are printed in the MLS, which can be easily verifiable that they were getting that, that is what you want to cover. Agents do have to initial and then they have to sign. So, and you do not sign before your client. I don't know where all of a sudden that came in, folks. If you are sending out a listing contract, your client needs to sign and then you sign. Because if you sign first and they go through and edit that document and you've already signed, you're the one that should be verifying that they've got all those initials in and signatures correct before you sign. All right, let's move on to the Adult Community Advisory and Addendum. When is this used, folks?
HOA.
55 plus.
Oh, that's it.
So we serve, because of probably the Sun Cities, created this form to help their real estate agents to better understand and communicate what is going on in those communities. So many times, let's take the Sun Cities, for example. Yes, they do have an HOA. Does anybody know what the cost for the HOA is in Sun City or Sun City West? I think it's the same.
Well, there's like, it's like,
No.
there's, oh, see,
No.
it's
Okay,
one thing that's
stop.
yeah.
My question was the HOA. $25
No.
is the HOA and it's voluntary. Thank you, Melissa Gasper.
That one.
Right.
But then there's
So,
all those other.
Oh, yeah,
but
yeah.
that's not an HOA.
Yeah.
That's where the confusion comes in. People want to use the HOA addendum form to talk about the rec center fees. Those are not HOAs.
$5 grand.
Well, that's a capital improvement fee through the rec centers. It's not through the HOA. So that's why this form helps explain that. It also talks about what community name you may be in. If there are age restrictions, obviously it's talking about that. But there may be capital improvement fees. Again, they are they have to they are addressed by the way title is taken. Some of them require both parties to pay rec center fees annually. Some require a household fee for whomever is in the household. Many times the water and wastewater services are done through private services, right? Again, those aren't HOA things, folks. This is a part of those rec centers because it is a community-wide thing, but it's not a city. Yes, it's called Sun City, but it's not actually an incorporated city. You're in an unincorporated part of Maricopa County. So you may be paying, your buyer may be paying separate for trash, water, fire, ambulance. So you need to help them as a listing agent. If you are not familiar with this, you need to read this form very carefully and talk to your seller about it to find out what information they have, right? Military airport. Are you in a military flight zone? Do you need to share that with the the buyers as the seller, right? You're helping your listing to get that listing up. What governing documents are there? CC&Rs? What applies? And unfortunately, you've got to understand that from the listing side, because who's going to call and ask those questions to you? The buyer's agent. Hey, what is this? Are the water services included? What, is that through the city? No, there's no city. Sun City doesn't have water services, right? Who's doing the water? Is it EPCOR? Who else is it, right? So you need to find out what that is from your seller to make sure you have that information to pass on, right? So here, this form actually has the premises are or are not located in Sun City or Sun City West. If not, skip to the signature line. If they're in Sun City or Sun City West, recreation fees in the amount of blank per person on deed or per household apply, right? Your seller needs to be giving you that information. Then you've got your transfer fee, cap improvement fees, and other fees, right? Buyer agrees to pay theirs. Isn't that interesting? That isn't saying it's negotiable. Now, is it negotiable? Yes. But it's put down here that the buyer is agreeing to pay these things and the seller's agreeing to pay these other things, right? Because the seller has to pay the recording fee and the resale disclosure fee in these areas. That's how they have it set up. The resale disclosure fee, that is a state law anyway, that's not happening, but otherwise. So again, these are part of the rec center fees. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
Melissa's
Yep.
Melissa's actually dropped the box in the chat box.
Melissa Gasper, thank you so much. Yep, it's too hard to grab those while I'm doing the presentation. Thank you. You're having fun. I love it.
Get out here.
She's on her computer. It's good. She's doing other things. So the party listing the amount of the fees has done so in good faith and to their best knowledge, right? Who's checking those fees? Are you as the listing agent, or are you asking your seller to call the rec centers and double check that information? Right? So parties are instructed to verify those fees, and they acknowledge that the brokers did not verify any of this information, right? They hold each other and the brokers harmless should the fees identified prove incorrect or incomplete. So it's important for you to get your clients to get that information in there if you're a listing agent. All right, let's go on to some of the Realty One Group working docs. If you are taking a listing, one of the first places you want to start is your document checklist. We have this in our working docs. Very easy to assist you. If we go to the far left column, you will see the traditional listing. Anything with those check boxes in red say that those are required, okay? So it's required to have your agency disclosure. It's required to have the ABA, the ER, of course. You've got to have your listing agreement or EA. The MLS profile and MLS printout. Now, of course, that's not required if you're not going on the MLS, but most people do, and therefore you would need it. That input sheet, again, I get that through the MLS. I go to the menu and I copy a previous one, or I start from there and add a listing so I can fill it in there. I print out the input forms so the seller can review all those lines and make sure that data is correct, okay? Then the MLS profile sheet is created when you actually shift it to active, right? Or coming soon. Wire fraud disclosure, just like with buyers, we want you as a seller to explain the wire fraud disclosure. Now, it's not necessarily as critical because usually the seller is not wiring money in, right? Money is being wired to them, but they should be very careful with how they're communicating their wiring instructions to title, right? We want to make sure, and usually, let's see, we got title here. So Art, when a seller is working with you, how do you get the wiring instructions from them?
There's usually a form that we have them complete and they're closing documents, and they either do that in office with us, and we verify their bank information once they complete it to make sure it's right, or it's done by a approved notary that's been vetted through the company and they obtain that information.
Okay, so again, there's a strict protocol for that. They're not getting it emailed to them, just like they would not email or ask email their instructions to a buyer and say, here, these are our instructions. Don't want to do that. And that's part of why we want to make sure that that wire fraud is signed by the seller, just so they understand how critical it is. There is a lot of wire fraud going on, and money unfortunately does disappear. So make sure that's not a part of your situation. Seller property disclosure statements, as I've said before, I like handing a printed version to my clients when I'm taking a listing appointment, right? Because I like them to be able to make notes before they go on to Breeze. Because once they're in Breeze, they're, oh, wait, where is that warranty, right? I got to go find it, then scan it in. So the seller property disclosure, please use Breeze, have them fill it out that way, but you might want to take a blank copy of the seller property disclosure so that they can see what needs to be filled in, okay? If they have any warranty information on, say, the air conditioner, the dishwasher, I don't know what that was, warranty, but air conditioner, water heater, those are the ones that typically the roof has a warranty. Those things, I recommend they scan them in to a folder that says home warranties or home information. So when they get to doing the Breeze, they can go right to that folder and pull those things over as they need. All of those warranties can stack in Breeze onto the spuds, and everybody signs off that they've gotten them. That's what's so beautiful about doing doing the spuds on the Breeze system. Then on the bottom here, you'll see the owner agent addendum to the purchase contract. I'll show you the bottom side here. Again, looking on the left-hand side, when you get a purchase contract, you will go down there. Obviously, if there are counteroffers, they're needed. You'll see the pre-qual, loan status update, earnest money receipt, the buyer inspection notice, seller response, then your CDI. Those are all required. Obviously, these other things would be fantastic. The thing that is probably not on here that we are asking you to do more and more is please make sure your inspection reports are put into the file. Okay, this is really important, especially for a seller, believe it or not. When they get that, if they get that, put it in there so we have it on record. Because if down the road the buyer comes back and says, hey, you didn't tell me, and they can go look at the inspection report that the buyer obviously got, and sure enough, look, it's right there. And we just had this happen. Did somebody online? No. So we just had this happen. Somebody wanted to file, basically come after the seller for an issue with a roof. And it was, I'm sorry, it was in the seller property disclosure statement that it said that that roof had two of those. It also said it in the inspection report that there were 2 layers of roofing up there. And the buyer was claiming that the seller did not disclose this. Like, you know what? Here it is in writing in 2 separate places. Buyer did not look at it. Okay. So protect your clients. Hopefully they filled it all out, but save those documents, right? So there is a spot in our SkySlope for the insurance history and for the home inspections. Please add those in there if you have them, both listing agents and buyer agents, please. So clue report, that's, please don't call it clue report. It's the inspection history report. Need to get them to fix that. On-site wastewater, these are all if applicable, right? If it applies, if there's lead-based paint, it's got to be in there, and it will pop up most of those. It'll say if applicable if it doesn't say anything else. All right, so let's talk about the affiliated business arrangement, the ABA. Thank you, Realty One Group, for making this a 2-page document after years of not having it 3 pages. So they've squished some stuff together and they removed my favorite. They removed the address. So this document gets signed when you first meet with your client, whether it is a homeowner or a buyer. Get this signed, right? This is talking, now you'll notice there are 2 headers on here. Does anybody see there are 2 different groups on the top of this form? Realty One Group and Realty One Group AZ. Does anybody know why there are 2 of them on there?
Isn't one not affiliated with the MLS? Yeah.
Close, not affiliated with the associations. Yes.
You know.
She's got the non-member is the Realty One Group AZ, correct? Yes. And so
Very close.
you were very close. So it is the non-member, but they are affiliated with the MLS. So it's MLS choice. They're not a part of NAR, AAR, or a local association. But our disclosures are required because Realty One Group and Realty One Group AZ both have affiliations, a business relationship. We all know that the owner owns Rock Title, owns part of Epic Lending, and then has a business relationship with one home warranty and one asset exchange, which is, by the way, a 1031 exchange company, right? So, and it goes into more detail there. So, this is important for your client to understand. They are not required to fill out, to use any of these companies if they don't want to, but they can see what the costs there are for them if they're going to use Rock Title. These things are already specified. They're, what are they called? Aren't there? Oh, filed rates. These have been filed with the Department of Finance. So, and by the way, every title company has those filed rates. These just happen to be the ones that are disclosed to us because we have an affiliation with them. Then you'll see one home warranty. It talks about the different home warranty packages. And if the seller wants to do a home warranty while they have the listing in place, they can do that. EVO Home Loans is called Epic Lending. It's a merger between CMG and our owner, right, Cuba. And then we do have the 1031 exchange service, one asset exchange, that can handle those 1031 exchanges. So the second page is talking about marketing agreements. So there are times when companies will go to Realty One Group and come up with a marketing plan that they are getting some, they're paying Realty One Group something for being a part of being promoted and advertised through Realty One Group across like the world, right? Especially across the United States. So we do have an insurance company. We do have something with Move Easy. You see that on our one suite. It's the concierge service that provides services for your client to get their utilities set up, right? When they move, they'll shut down the one and move them over. Also, Old Republic Home Warranty comes under that marketing agreement. Now, again, you want to explain to your clients, in this case, these are the listers, but the reason you have to give it to your seller is because of, if you want to take advantage of that Rock Title benefit of both parties receiving 50% off of the escrow fee, the seller needs to understand that there's a relationship there and why they're being offered that opportunity, right? You don't just shove in front of them and say, hey, yeah, here, sign here. I'm going to put that on the listing. You need to explain this to your clients, right? And they can say, you know what, I don't care about saving $50. Don't do that. That's fine. That's their choice. Okay. Then you don't put anything in the listing. But if they want to take advantage of it, you have to post it in the listing. And who should you get approval of that before you put it in the listing? The seller. Okay. So as you're going over the ABA, that first page would be where you would talk about that. The bottom of this, it says very clearly, there are other companies with other services. They can choose to use any of them, right? So very important that they are aware of that. The bottom of this is interesting. So we do actually have a sub-agency situation. If you were to have, if you're the listing agent, you're obviously, well, not obviously, but most of you are with Realty One Group. If an agent were to write a contract on and they're new contracts, by the way, they just came out from the non-member forms group over at Phoenix. If they were to write one of those contract offers and make an offer on a property and they were with Realty One Group AZ, technically we have a sub-agency, okay? They're legally separate. They often work together. Sub-agency happens when one broker chooses another broker to help with task services and fiduciary duties for the client. There is a sub-agency relationship between Realty One Group and Realty One Group AZ. These agencies from both brokers act as sub-agents for each. Hold on a second, okay? So you need to understand, in this office, I have some non-member agents. I am the broker under Realty One Group, but I am allowed to be the broker for those individuals. So the state has allowed us to do this, but that's why this disclosure is here, right? They're acknowledging this sub-agency and consent to that moving forward. And we make no warranties or representations regarding those services provided by any of the service providers. So we're wrapping back up on top there. your
Yeah,
questions.
so with sub-agency of ROG, I'm the listing agent. Is that still considered consent to limited representation? With a sub-agency?
I believe it is, even though there are two different brokers, but that is a great question and I will get an answer from
I love that.
Ron, because I have not run across that yet.
Okay.
I do know if you're ever doing a transaction with one of our franchises, it is not a limited representation.
Oh, wow.
So if you're doing something with Realty One Group Mountain Desert, that is not a consent to limited because they have their own broker. It is completely a separate entity. Okay. Same materials, same structures, but it is separate because they're under totally separate tracking, etc. Different company. Okay. So please take the time to go over this with your clients, so that they understand this form. All right. Owner agent addendum. Anybody have a guess on why we have this owner agent addendum? So this means you have an interest in the property that you are selling. So if you have an LLC that owns the property and you have a financial interest in that LLC, you are an owner agent. People are like, oh, it's just my LLC. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. It's still yours. You're part of the ownership, okay? So this is an owner agent disclosure of personal interest. It is an addendum to the residential real estate purchase contract, vacant land contract, or commercial real estate purchase contract, right? So I'm sorry. Yeah, all of those are purchases. So, and yes, I know I'm on the listing side, but the problem is that oftentimes this is done, you have to do this with your seller if your seller is the one that is selling that property and they're an owner agent. So usually that's you, but sometimes say I don't want to list my own property and, Doug, I'm going to go ahead and have you list my property, whatever. I'm going to have Ami list my property, right? So, but even if I'm not the one that's actually listed, I'm still an owner agent. So please understand that. If any of you are selling property, you have an owner agent obligation, even if you are not standing in as the agent on that transaction. Okay. So the reason for this is that the listing agent seller, it does say listing agent, is the owner of and has ownership interest in. So I guess this is, I thought it was even if you were not the listing agent, but this is saying that you're the listing agent and the seller. But it is, again, even if you just have a financial interest and it's an LLC, there may be other parties, but you're the one signing, or even if you're not the signer, if you have a financial interest in that LLC, that is included, okay? It needs to be noted, though, part of the reason for this is that the listing agent holds the real estate license and they are an independent contractor. Realty One Group has no financial interest in those properties, okay? Realty One Group has no personal knowledge of the property. This is important. Does anybody figure out why this is important? Nobody said the reason. Any guesses? Melissa Gasper, you going to come running out? You're not listening, okay. Anybody can guess why this is so critical? What is such a big issue these days? Why is it so important we have this form?
To declare the owner agent.
Uh-huh.
So that we're at an advantage for agent.
Well, no, the reason is for your errors and omissions insurance. Okay. So I just had an agent call and she said, hey, look, I'd like to, I have a property, I have a tenant in it. I just want to go to title and sell it and just, I don't have to bring that through Realty One Group, right? Yeah, wrong. Wrong. And here's the reason, right? So 3 years down the road, that buyer sues. Who are they suing? Well, we had nothing to do with it. Really?
Wait.
There's no E&O because they did it at title. She's not covered and neither are we. And she is a licensed agent. So in your ICA, by the way, if you sell any property or do, any of that, if you sell any property, you must go through Realty One Group. You have to do it through Realty One Group. So it's processed through here. So you have E&O coverage, right? That's the whole point of this. So this is very clear that it is the agent has an ownership interest and is acting as the seller, right? The agent has an ownership interest. So you do have to be the listing agent on it, okay? So buyer understands that information buyers receive from the listing agent seller is provided in their capacity as the seller, not on behalf of Realty One Group, right? Buyer further understands Realty One Group has assisted in marketing and processing. We have, however, any information has come from the seller, right? Buyer acknowledges they've been strongly advised to investigate the condition and suitability of the property through their own professionals, They're advised to seek guidance and expertise of an attorney, accountant, or other appropriate professionals to assist with the purchase of the property. Now, can the seller listing agent represent the buyer?
Yeah.
Can
Well,
the seller, if they are
they
the
take
owner,
They take an interest in the property.
if they are an owner of the property, can they represent the buyer? No, they cannot, under no circumstances. Right? Who's going to win that?
That's gonna be a conflict.
Who's going to win that? Let's see. It's my property, but I'm going to help you out. I promise. I'm going to deal with you. All fair dealings, right?
In their best interest.
In whose best interest, right? Whose best interest? Mine, right? And that is not a Realty One Group ruling. That is a Arizona statute. You cannot, as the owner agent, represent the buyer. So if there is a buyer that wants to buy, say that tenant wants to buy the property from their landlord, who happens to be the listing agent, they can get another agent, or they can go unrepresented. Not ideal, but if that's what they choose to do, they can do that. Yeah.
What does that extend the relationship? So, yes, if it's something you all, but what, does that fair game at that point, as long as you're not.
So the owner agent addendum only applies if you are an owner. Whether you can represent a buyer and it is a immediate family member that you're representing, the answer is no. Because who's going to win? Your family. So no, you cannot represent a buyer on a listing that you represent, say, your son. Not going to happen, right? So, but you only need the owner agent addendum if you have a financial interest in the property. Now, this gets a little dicey, folks. If you are married, the property is in your spouse's name as sole and separate. It's a little bit dicey there. I would probably just double check at that time if you need it, because I would say no, but technically on community property, you might have a financial interest. However, if it's held sole and separate, you don't. That money goes separately. It's not, I mean, you could send it into an account together, but technically that money would go into a separate account without your.
What if that?
Oh,
We don't know that, we wouldn't know that, but if it's owned sole and separate, usually it's going sole and separate. So it's going to, yeah. Well, and again, the agent's not signing anything. If it's sole and separate and their spouse is the one signing everything, the seller is not, the listing agent's not signing any of that. Sorry, listing agent. Okay. So again, there's some very clear things here, and I want to make this clear. The sentence says buyer agrees a home warranty will be placed on the property at close of escrow, or hereby acknowledges that he has been offered a home warranty and has declined in writing. That would be applicable on the residential real estate purchase contract, right? Does it say who pays for that home warranty here? Does anybody see who's paying for that? There are owners that think that they have to pay for it. Now, I encourage you to, but nowhere on this document does it say you have to pay for that. It just says the buyer understands that a home warranty is available, right? It's been placed on it or has been offered a home warranty. Guess what? Here's a piece of paper. Here's a home warranty. If you want to buy it, that's offered. It just lets them know that if they want to do that, they have that choice. It's still negotiable in the contract, folks. This does not say you, I know.
Still going to provide this, but now that you're saying, now that I'm looking at it.
Nope.
I'm dissecting it, it doesn't say that.
It's amazing when you reread documents, isn't it? So, and buyer agrees to complete one or more professional inspections, and by closing, buyer verifies that buyer is satisfied with the condition of the property, or buyer hereby acknowledges that he has been offered the opportunity and has declined in writing. So if they're not going to do a home inspection, they have to actually state that they are waiving that home inspection. Does everybody know that that's in the buyer inspection notice and seller response? Buyer hereby waives the inspection, right? So the point of this document, and yes, this is a listing document, right? But this is to separate the listing agent and the buyer on some very clear disclosure terms to make sure that our E&O coverage is covering that listing agent. If you don't have this, your E&O coverage is not able to protect you. It's a very simple form that's required by our errors and emissions insurance code. So really, really important if you're selling any property. Owner agent, okay. See, I've got the little ors here, right? Has declined in writing or, and then has declined in writing. So, all right, how are we doing on time here? Oh, yeah, good. So I'm only going to get through the post and not the free. How many of you have ever read the post-possession addendum agreement? So for starters, do we like post-possession or pre-possession agreement?
No.
The answer is no. Do we find ourselves in situations where we have to use them?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you have a draft form that is available to you? Yes.
Pretty bad.
They're all pretty bad.
Yeah.
You will see at the very top of this form, it says this is being provided as a courtesy to the parties. Realty One Group, we make no statement or warranty as to the legal validity of this form, right? And you'll see in bold, the parties are advised to seek appropriate counsel from lender, insurance, legal, tax, and accounting professionals before entering into this agreement. And consider the use of a lease agreement rather than a post-possession agreement. Does anybody know some of the reasons why agents want to use the post-possession versus a lease agreement? What legal standings cover a post-possession versus, let's start with what covers a lease agreement? Whose rules cover a lease agreement? Arizona Landlord Tenant Act. Thank you, Melissa Gasper. Arizona Landlord Tenant Act, okay? What is one of the tenets of the Arizona Landlord Tenant Act? Does anybody know what the process is to get somebody out of a lease?
Oh, domestic violence?
No,
Like,
no, no.
oh, evict 5-day notice.
It's not a 5-day notice. There's an eviction. There are some cases where it's 5-day, but how long is the eviction process if you don't have the ability to use the 5-day
At
notice?
least 30 days.
It's at least 30 days, right? Does anybody know if you have a buyer with a loan, how quickly that buyer, if it's an owner occupied purchase and they have a loan on it, when do they need to be in possession of that property? 60 days. Thank you from title. 60 days. Thank you, Art. From the date of, yes, 60 days.
Certainly, you're no longer 59 days on post-possession.
Correct. So post-possession's like 59 days. Yes, exactly. So the problem is if you do a lease agreement and you have something, a snafu, and the seller doesn't move, that buyer then is potentially in breach of their loan or in mortgage fraud for not taking possession when they need to take possession in 60 days because they can't get him out in 60 days. That's a federal crime, right? So the post-possession agreement does not fall under that Arizona Landlord Tenant Act. So I do believe it would be more of an potentially an eviction, not an eviction, but the ability to lock them out and say they've overstayed their welcome, basically, almost under like the hotel, where if you overstay in the hotel, they just go change the locks and they'll work out, they'll move your stuff into a storage unit, you can come get it, right? So again, there are other laws that come into effect which allows the buyer a little additional structure should there be an issue at the end getting the seller out. Okay. But it's up to your buyer to research that. Now, don't show me hands. How many of you have ever had a post-possession agreement? Well, that you can give me a hand. How many of you had post-possession agreements? Right? Ami, you've never had. You don't want one? Okay. Then the question is, how many of you have actually had your buyers read this document before they signed it and gone and sought legal counsel? Nobody, right? So, and sellers, so, when you get an offer that says they want a short-term possession, they want a post-possession, please, buyer agents, please do not write in the contract, we'll come up with an agreement later. But by whose terms? Agreed by whom? Right? You're going to say, yes, we're going under contract, and it's including a post-possession lease or post-possession agreement, which we'll deal with later. That would be an excellent idea. Ami has just said that should probably be included with the contract. The details of that should be included. Like, is it 5 days? Is it 10 days? Is it 20 days? Is there money involved, right? So here you'll see the parties, right? The address. And then this is an agreement. And it says, note, buyer may be required to occupy premises within 60 calendar days, right? So this is, we placed it in here so you can explain that, right? Here's the possession. Buyer grants seller permission to retain possession of the premises beginning on close of escrow until a date, or you can write a number of days after close of escrow, right? So let's say close of escrow might be moving a few days. Everybody's trying to work things out. You could put down 10 days after close of escrow, 2 days after close of escrow. Give them that opportunity to pack up and get out. Whichever occurs last, for the limited purpose checked below, they're continuing to physically occupy the premises, or they're storing their personal property in the following areas without physically occupying the premises. Got all the stuff in the garage, right? We're not going to be in the main house. Everything is outside, in the backyard. We'll be coming to pick the rest of it up because we had a bunch of stuff in the back that has been stacked up, okay? Occupancy should be limited to the following occupants. Who is going to live there? Right now, seller, I get you're not preparing this, but you need to know what this says. If you're looking for a post-possession, you better be able to provide this information. Who's living here? The one I love, the following animals as described. I don't know any that are living there. How about, 3 dogs, a goat, a hamster? I don't know. What animals are there, right? By the way, the seller has to provide a buyer a key to the premises. It says a commencement of this agreement. Well, should be at closing. That's kind of interesting. I've never read that. Whoops, let me go back. Then it says seller shall use the premises as personal residence only. There's some disclosures about smoking and marijuana, and any CC&Rs, fines and assessments, right? Go to, at that point, it still goes to the seller. Utilities, the utilities stay in the seller's names, right? And that means as the listing agent, make sure you're reminding your seller don't turn off your utilities. You got to keep them on until you move out, okay? So this is the one that is interesting, and I have never gotten a full answer to this. So again, this is not the lease agreement, which the lease actually falls under the Arizona Landlord Tenant Act. How much can you charge security on a property? Does anybody remember on a lease? No more than 1.5 times. If the rent is zero, what's your security department to deposit? Deposit?
1.5 times zero.
1.5 times zero is how much?
Zero.
Zero. Thank you, Dave. So here's the thing. So if you use the lease and you're not charging anything and you want a security deposit, you can't do that on the lease. Here, it does not say that. And again, we're not under Arizona Landlord Tenant Act, right? So oftentimes I'm seeing a lot of zeros on here. Be aware if something goes awry at the end, who's picking up that tab? So, and remember, your agency ends. When does your agency end on a transaction? At close of escrow. You have a post-possession and you were the listing agent. What calls are you getting that you shouldn't be getting? You are done. You are done. According to them, you're not, but you are done as of close of escrow. Post-possession is not your responsibility. But how many times are we yanked into it, right? So this is saying if they fail to vacate, right? Seller agrees to pay blank per day. I highly recommend you put a number in there. If they don't vacate, make that number painful. Look, you can stay, but you're not staying a day after this spot, right? So, and said holdover may result in eviction action unless it's written in a written agreement to extend it, okay? If you're asking for security deposit, this is where it is. You need to figure out, is that going to the buyer? Is it going to the title company? It's going to the title company. You better dang well check with your title company that they will take that check. And where does the check go afterwards, right? So this actually talks about it in here that says buyer shall return any unused portion of the deposit with itemization money withheld within 21 calendar, not business, calendar days. So if escrow fails to close, deposit been paid, deposit has to be returned. So, okay. Insurance. When the transaction closes, what insurance is covering the property after closing?
Homeowners.
Who's homeowners?
No. Wait. Oh, buyers.
Buyer's insurance is covering the property after close of escrow.
Yeah.
The seller must maintain an insurance policy, which means they have to buy renter's insurance, folks. Personal property, liability, and loss of use, because their insurance is no longer in effect. They're staying there 10 days. They have to have that insurance coverage, right? That's why this says buyer and seller advised to contact their respective insurance carriers before entering into this agreement. That's the seller. That's who you're representing, right? Seller, you need to make sure you're getting renter's insurance. I don't need that. Yes, you do. You signed, you were going to have insurance with a minimum of personal liability, and loss of use. All three of those. So make sure you're explaining that. Assignment and unauthorized occupancy. During that post-possession, the seller can't let other people come and live at the property, right? It's not able to be assigned. Okay. The seller cannot make any improvements to the property or modifications during the post-possession term. Maintenance. The seller agrees to maintain and repair the premises so that it remains in substantially the same condition at time of close of escrow. Now, that means complying with HOA regulations, right? If damage occurs because of the seller's negligence, seller has to be fully responsible for the cost of repair, regardless of the insurance coverage obtained by the buyer. However, the seller may not make any repairs to premises without obtaining prior written consent of the buyer. And if other repairs are required per section 8, I have to go back up to see that. They have to notify the buyer and grant buyers access to have their contractors come view it. Buyer and seller are strongly encouraged to place a home warranty on the property. Why is that in there in bold ink? Because during that post-possession, that home warranty is in place. Something goes wrong with the property, most likely the home warranty may cover it. And therefore, that's a protection on all parties. If that home warranty is there, they're not going, but this is you have to pay this. I have to, get the home warranty out there, right? Let the home warranty cover it. So during post-possession, buyer may enter the premises without consent in case of emergency. And I have once had a property where I got a call from a postal worker who saw my sign and called my name on the sign and said, "There's water running out your garage. Thought I'd let you know." Jumped in my car and drove down the street. So obviously if the homeowner, the new buyer is driving down the road and there's water running out the garage, they have the right to enter that property without calling and saying, "Hey, just want you to know I'm coming into the property." That there's a reason for that, right? But they can't just pull up and say, "Yep, just thought I'd stop by and take a look." No, not at all. Okay. They have to give at least 24 hours written notice with the intent to enter and enter at only reasonable times. So the seller also cannot allow any liens or judgments or other encumbrances to be placed on the premises during the agreement. So if they're there for 30 or 40 days, they can't let a lien get attached to the home. And if you'll notice, this is all in big bold. Why? Because we're indemnifying the brokerages, right? We, as a brokerage, do not get involved in a post-possession. They need to leave us out of it. So as much as we know that they're still going to sue everybody. So, but we don't provide advice on this. This is where you need to strongly encourage them, to have a different strategy. Is there another possibility rather than doing post-possession? Is there a short-term rental you can go into? Can you use, I think we've got Camelback Moving Company. They'll let you store your stuff for 2 days, right? Is it possible to get it packed up with them, go into a short-term rental or go stay with, family members or friends while all your stuff is in storage for a couple of days? So when you're taking a listing, one of the things you should be asking is, what is the plan what's your exit strategy? What is the plan at the end of this? You're buying another home. You can't buy that till this sells. How do you want to manage this, right? Have you looked at your contingency form, right? Buyer contingency form? Have you reviewed that to see what risk you're at if you're not under contract before you make an offer with that seller? So when they say, I want to stay in the property, get them this document. We don't advise you do a post-possession, but if you're going to do a post-possession, you need to call your insurance company. You need to call, these other people to verify what does that mean to you, right? If that's really the best way for you to do this, then let's figure out that game plan up front, not at the last minute, right? Because you need to know when a buyer is calling, say, is there anything important to the seller? And you're like, well, I'd really like to stay in the property for a week. Yeah, I think we can make that happen. Great. Right? Then are you telling them, by the way, there are 4 dogs and the chickens, they're all staying for that week too? Right. I mean, you're the listing agent. If you've got a buyer calling about this, you need to know if that's what your seller wants. Right? That's one of the things as a buyer's agent, you're trying to figure out how can I best write my offer to make it appeal to the seller. And if that's something that the seller really wants to do and you have not been able to find another solution, like really, can't we just put your stuff in storage for a week? Is there some place you can stay? Now, it's hard this time of year. Look, I understand that we're in the middle of winter season, and if the prices weren't bad, they're going to be bad over the next 30 days, right? We've got baseball started, right? So we've got all spring training here, and then we've got the women's Final Four. I mean, there's stuff happening here. Trying to find a vacation rental right now or a hotel room is very costly, right? Different story, middle of summer, somebody needs a month in a vacation rental fully furnished, no problem, right? You can find those a dime a dozen and you can negotiate a cheap price for it because there's plenty of them available. So please have that conversation with your sellers before you or when you're taking the listing to figure out what they're planning on doing. Okay.
So if I have and this pops up, where's this have to be scheduled? How about it to say, we're actually getting a bunch of offers on the house, right? Remember those days?
Yep.
But
Well, they're still happening.
how about if you're choosing that offer, that buyer's agent failed to disclose, like, oh, hey, they're gonna need to be, they wanted the post possession for like 2 weeks or something.
Well, that's your seller that wants the post possession.
The post possession, like, doesn't that have to be disclosed before?
Well, you're the one as the listing agent that should be disclosing it. If you know your seller wants to stay in the property another month, let's just say a month, right? Okay. That's part of what you have to have your conversation with your seller when you're taking that listing. If you know they need to stay on because they need to have time to pack up that 40 years of stuff, right? And they don't feel that they can get out in time, then you need to have them review this as you're giving them the rest of your paperwork. They're not signing it, but you're giving it to them to review, okay? And have them go over it so that they know. And then if you're getting multiple offers, then your comment is, yeah, the seller would very much like to stay in the property for, 2 weeks at no cost and 2 weeks at, I don't know, $100 a week, whatever it is, right? You come up with something depending on the weather, right? So you can then do that, but you need to set that up for you to be able to have that information and tell a potential buyer, this is what the seller wants. And if everybody's saying no, 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 you're going back to your seller and going, look, nobody wants to do this. Everybody needs to move in because they got to get in on that date for whatever reason, right? What other options do we have? But it should be part of your listing conversation. Why do you need a post possession, right? So before Rebecca's getting ready, but I just want to put a little tagline on here. If you guys are not aware, the FinCEN regulations went into effect on March 1st. If you have, is it cash buyers or buyers that are either in a trust or an LLC?
It's buyers that are in a cash transaction and are in entity. In saying that, I just had a client send me a cash contract yesterday, but the buyer was an individual and the seller is an entity is a trust, but FinCEN does not take effect because the buyer is an individual, even though he's paying cash.
Okay, so if you have any LLCs or trusts that are buying properties with cash,
They're subject to FinCEN.
they're subject to FinCEN, which means more disclosures and clarification and proof of who they are. So please be aware of that. We are getting more information and we'll have more in our newsletter at the end of the week for any additional training that I believe Rock Title's got another class coming up so that you can go learn more about this. This office does a ton of cash purchases. So I need to make sure that agents are seeing this and aware of it, okay? This is not a Realty One Group. This is not a Arizona Department of Real Estate. This is the financial entities. Yes.
And let me let you know, because I know you people are gonna think this, well, I'll just have my client buy as an individual, then we'll go do a deed and put it in his LLC. If you do that, they're still subject to FinCEN. And whoever draws that document or records that document is gonna be responsible for obtaining all that information from the entity that it's going into. So people are already thinking, well, I'll just buy it by myself and then I'll put it in my trust or I'll put it in my LLC. Nope, you're still subject. There's 7 levels of responsibility of who needs to report FinCEN according to whether it's a title company, if it's done individually, if you're preparing the deed,
If it's not, who's recording the deed? There's, I think, 7 levels of responsibility on this fencing and who has to report it. And if you think you're gonna do it and not get caught, most thieves, and I'm not saying anybody's a thief, but most think they can get away with something. And maybe you can and never get caught. Maybe you will for a little while and then get caught. I don't know. I'm just letting you know that if you think you can take it as individual and then convey it into an LLC, it still has to be reported when it goes into that LLC or that trust.
And all that information is confidential in the portal that we're using.
Yeah.
To submit all that information.
So it's all confidential on the portal that's being used to report that per Rebecca with Rock. So, and you know, what Art is saying, we know it's not perhaps you, but your clients may want to try to skirt this. You need to let them know that that is not a possibility. Again, this is not a Realty One Group thing. It is not even a Department of Real Estate thing. This is, it's not a title company thing. This is a federal mandate. Department of Treasury. So all of these things are going to be scrutinized. So if you have cash buyers that you know like to do this out of LLCs or go in and out of trusts and stuff, please let them be aware of this. You take the time in the coming weeks to get into one of these classes and make sure you're understanding what all is going to be required by those buyers, especially if you're working with cash buyers. Okay. We are going to end here. I didn't have that much more. Hold on, let me see. I had another document here after this, I think. I had one more to go. I don't like prepossessions anyway. Don't do prepossessions. I had somebody call me for that and said, you do understand they're taking possession before. What happens if the loan? Oh, I was going to do the due on sale. So we'll pick that up at another time. But that's just an addendum. So yeah, move in and then it never funds. So let me go ahead and stop recording here, but thank you very much for joining me today. Next week is our office meeting. I hope you'll join us for the March office meeting.